Hey, how are you today? This is Josh Patrick here at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. And today my guest is Hillary Johns. And Hillary is an attorney. I guess she's got offices all over the world, but actually in New York and California. And I hear Montana is coming up soon. So she has lots of stuff, and she is an expert in employee law, intellectual property law, entertainment law, but today we're going to talk about employment law because those of us in the construction business or those have issues with employees all the time. And one of the biggest questions I get is, what can I do legally? I'm not an attorney, but Hillary is, so we'll bring Hillary on and we can start the conversation. Hey, Hillary, how are you today?
I'm great, Josh. Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I guess my co-counsel Trigger is joining us today. So, for you
Oh.
animal lovers, we're still living. I don't have. This is not my tail. it's yeah. It's so nice. Thank you for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, I'll ask you the question that I hear all the time. What is the biggest thing I have to be worried about if I'm in the construction world and I have employees?
Okay. There's actually two. There's wage and hour compliance, and there's making sure that you don't create a hostile work environment. So, one, wage and hour compliance. I think there are different ways that people hire each other, either particularly if in the construction industry, subcontractors, vendors, people who are on staff, and W 2 employees. You need to make sure that you're in compliance with your federal, state, and primarily local ordinances. What, for example, in Los Angeles and New York, for example, and in different states, there are different cities will have different compliance regulations. So you need to make sure you're in compliance with that, make sure your wage statement is correct, make sure that you're keeping proper documentation. Because particularly, I'm amazed in this day and age how many people still use paper. And I think there are some pluses to that. I literally have people like, oh, I have it written down somewhere. And let's face facts: if the internet goes down or we get hacked, you're not going to have any backup. So it is, there are some pluses to it. It is smart to do, but I'm also surprised how disorganized a lot of employers are. And when they need to find something, like for example, they get audited by the Employment Development Department or they get a claim for the Labor Board, they don't know where anything is. And that you need to make sure that you're doing that. It seems intimidating when you look at it, but each state is pretty good about having a summary of your laws, no matter what state you're in, that says this is what you need to do. There's your minimum wage, these are your hours, these are your breaks. This is what qualifies as a W 2 employee. This is what qualifies as an independent contractor. And if you do those and you have a list, and even someone in your HR, if you're not big enough to have an HR department or an assistant, it is very doable, but you just need to put in the time. It's really just a few hours to get organized and keep track of it, and each person who's involved in your company.
Oh, I have a question right along that lines. Almost all the payroll services these days are offering HR consulting as part of the package they have. Are they any good at what they do? And is that something you should consider if you have a 10-person company and don't have your own HR department?
I think it is. Some are good, some are not. You're usually better off going. Some of them want to sell you products. They'll call a time. We use a payroll service for our employees, and since we do this kind of work, we don't get the training. They'll call up, but they are not lawyers, so it is probably worthwhile to have someone who's an attorney to call once in a while. I think the HR consulting firms can do a competent job in certain things to make sure that you're dotting your I's and crossing your T's. What they can't help you with usually is wage and hour compliance. Is someone in a W 2 employee or an independent contractor? That's, as you know, gotten national attention where someone works full time and there really are, like the Uber cases you hear these things. That I don't know that an HR specialist would be particularly helpful with you. They may be because they're not lawyers, so they're going to give you the standard. And again, the answer is it depends. But I think a lot of companies have benefited from them. They either have someone they call, and it is good to have that and say, "Do you have a list?" Often they have forms. California requires posters. You have to post in break rooms and things like that, or if the person's working remotely. So it's a good place to start. And I know that usually the packages, they don't cost too much more either. So it's a very affordable way to do it.
Yeah, that's been my experience so far is that they seem to be, at least the big ones seem to be pretty good. And also, I find the newer companies tend to do a better job than the companies that have been around for about 1,000 years.
Yeah, and I think so. I think they try harder and they hustle. They know that they want your business and they give personalized attention. So there is that, and it's you just want to make sure you're not in a situation where you're going to somewhere where it's like calling customer service at the bank. Please press 5, and and then you're on hold and you don't really get a hold of someone. They also, a lot of these companies have resources like forums and things like that that can be very helpful, because even just looking at one, going, oh, okay, I see what I need to do. Because some people, you tell them and they're like, okay, I sort of get what you're saying, things like that. They also have shrm.org and a lot of other companies, for a modest fee. You can have the forms available, and you can get the updates. It depends how involved you want to be. It is worthwhile for you if you have several employees, even if you have people coming and going. Retail, construction, those would be two areas where maybe you have some day workers, or maybe you have a certain project and you're calling people for a certain period of time just to come in. I just need you to do this. Another thing I did want to say, just going over into another subject, would be a hostile work environment, but I want to hear what you have to say first, Josh.
No, I actually do want to talk. I was just about to say, let's move over to hostile work environment, because I can tell you that in the construction world, there are a lot of companies that have a hostile work environment, and they probably shouldn't.
I agree. We've worked in several, in construction, I will say, is one. We get a lot of calls and we do a lot of work, and I get the very common thing say, well, Hillary, this is construction. It's different. Rules don't apply here. Okay, that's not true. They apply everywhere. They apply to everyone. The main thing is be nice and civil and respect people. And I know in certain things, sports, I was very into that. I work in Hollywood. A lot of these things, sometimes it's harder to do. And there's an established way people do things. And hey, you such and such and things like that. But any kind of comments about a person's ethnicity, sexuality, comments that could be deemed offensive, you always have to remember, just because I think it's funny doesn't mean someone else will. And it doesn't mean you have to tippy toe around, but you have to think about how it's perceived. And what you also need to remember is a witness can also sue. So if you have someone, say I make a comment to you, but Jack is sitting over here and he's like, Hillary, you're like, no, Hillary just made a joke. And Jack says, Hillary, I found that really offensive. I'm very uncomfortable. That could get you sued or a claim.
Yeah, the thing that I've heard a lot, or I hear a lot when I talk to people about hostile work environments, is you have to be really clear with your supervisors that anytime a complaint is told to you, you have to take it seriously. Way too often I see people, well, I didn't think it was really that much, and then bang, they're into an equal opportunity thing, which is a $10,000 legal bill to start off with, because I had one of those ones. Really
Yeah.
dumb one too, by the way.
You
It was
know,
because
it,
I did.
go ahead.
I had a thief who I didn't give a car to, and she sued me because she didn't get a car, but the other supervisors did.
Yeah. How could you do that, Josh? That's so insensitive. It's a
Yes, I know.
to be sure, there are people who take advantage, and that's very true. Any complaint, that is the law. Any complaint should be taken seriously, and things like, oh, I know such and such. The common mistakes are, I know such and such. They would never do that, and it may be true. I don't know, or it's not a formal complaint. Often people don't realize. Say you're talking to a coworker, and you're saying, Hillary made these comments. I'm very uncomfortable, and that is a complaint. And if it gets to HR, does that supervisor have a duty to anything should be documented and investigated, even if nothing comes of it. And it should be conducted by someone who tries to remain objective. Because often, if you know a person and you've known them for years, and you go, I can't imagine such and such would do that. But you'd be surprised. I've had it had done happen in my professional life where you're like, I never would have thought this person would have do this. You don't always know, but the main thing is, if you get sued, you want to make sure that you conducted an investigation. Because if the EEOC or a civil plaintiff's attorney finds that, and they say that they will point to, and that can increase your liability as part of the company, that you failed to investigate. And so, if you investigate and try to do that, it may not completely relieve you of any kind of liability, but it will greatly reduce it. And there are laws to protect you.
Yeah, that's been my understanding along the lines, along the years. So, a lot of companies have employee handbooks, and a lot of companies don't have employee handbooks. Where do you stand on that?
I generally don't recommend them. And the reason is because the law has changed. It used to be an employee handbook was great. Oh, wow, this person's really organized. But there's been a trend lately because an employee handbook, if you sign for it, can be, or even accept it or receive it, can be considered a contract. So if the company is not up to date on its laws, like say, for example, we do this continuously. We update our laws and our policies, and we send out notices to our clients going, hey, this changed. If you don't update it and your handbook is out of date, that can be used as evidence against you as a contract, for example, of unfair business practices or that you're not staying current on the law. So what we recommend are called policies. So it's similar where you have a policy. This is our sexual harassment prevention policy. This is our ADA policy. This is our policy for here. We have a policy of not discriminating. So we recommend a policy, and we also put something in that says, given this is a rapid or fast changing area of the law, we want to be clear this can't be used as evidence of unfair business practices, things like that. Because say you have we've got clients, I had one recently came to me, and they go, oh, we have one from like 5 or 10 years ago. And the law has changed a lot in this area. So it's not going to be worth much because maybe what they're saying isn't even the law anymore. But what you don't want to have that is that someone, plaintiff's attorney, showing the court, waving it around like this, saying, see, none of these policies are legal. They didn't care. That's what they're going to say. So you don't want that to be used as evidence against you. And you may look on a lot of these, it used to be you'd really see very prominently the employee handbook. Now you're not seeing those. Now you're seeing like policies, checklists, things like that. So I think it's the better practice. And to protect my clients, I usually recommend they don't have them. But a policy is fine. This is our mission. We want to be ever friendly. We don't discriminate. We want to respect everyone, things like that. And if there's a problem, here's what you can call. What is essential to any employee? Make sure you have a list of resources if they want to file a complaint. You'd be surprised how critical that is. So for your state and the EEOC, say, this is the link if you want to file a complaint. Not that you want to encourage people to complain against you, but if someone ever looked at this, they're going to look and say, they were given resources, they were fair. And that's what you want.
Interesting. Talking about the EEOC, and I know it is a state by state sort of issue, is that when someone files a complaint with them, do they take all the complaints seriously, or do they actually, do some investigation before they start driving the business owner crazy?
It's been my experience. I've experienced both. I had one recently where a client of mine who is an HR person, they consult with us when they got an EOC complaint. She goes, I don't know who this is. There's literally nothing in the description that they're telling us. All they said was it was a discrimination complaint. I think it was a discrimination complaint based on, I think it was race or religion or something like that. But it didn't have any facts. It didn't state the date. And so it was just a very general. I think it depends on the seriousness of the complaint. The EEOC gets so many of them that I think it does. They do have a duty to investigate. So most employers are going to get the letter. They're going to get the generated letter, with the caption saying, "I need this information." I think that's where most of them go. It doesn't mean they aren't serious complaints, but they do have to have information gathering. I've had a few where they will actually call the attorney, and say, I need this information. I need this information. What can you tell me? But that's been my experience with most of them. Unless
So,
there's something. Go ahead.
so when you get one of those letters, it would seem to me it would be really a bad idea for you to answer that letter yourself without getting an attorney involved with this.
I think so. One, because you might give them too much information. Sometimes you can get the thing to go away without giving much information. I'm not saying you shouldn't be candid, but I think when people get these, there's the tendency to react emotionally, particularly if it's a date or something like that, and they know who the person complaining is. And so if you do that, I think you're putting yourself at risk. And I think it is always better to consult with an attorney. Even if, a lot of people know lawyers who are they're friends of theirs. And so if you're doing that, sometimes people will help you out and just say, let me take a look at it. This is what you need to say. This is what you don't need to say. And again, I'm not in any way suggesting you shouldn't be candid with a government investigation agency or entity, but you don't need to give away the story either. So I think it's always a good idea to call. And a lot of these people do free consultations and just give you their impressions. Yeah, because then again, business is very personal to everybody. It's your business, it's your livelihood. You put your heart and soul into these things and your blood, sweat, and tears. And if someone's attacking your business by filing a complaint, or it's an employee who's particularly difficult, there is the tendency to react emotionally. It's also your reputation and a lot of other aspects of it. So you don't want to get on the EOC's radar.
So when I had my vending company, it was a really bad thing that started, and we finally ended it. Was that we would fire somebody, and they would immediately go to a lawyer, and the lawyer would come and start writing us letters about wrongful termination. And my it ended up costing us about $5,000 every time we got one of these letters because it was cheaper to pay it off than to go down that road. We finally got people said, okay, when we fire you, here's a release. You can sign this and we'll give you a severance package. If you
Hmm.
don't sign it, we don't give you a severance package.
Right.
Is that legal to do still?
You can do a separation agreement with them and say, look, you're being, if you wanted, it is legal to do it as long as they're not coerced into doing it. They should have an attorney. You should really encourage them to have an attorney and say, what you can say is, look, we're giving you a severance package, to obtain it. The way I would put it is, I wouldn't put it that way. I would say, we're giving you a severance, we're going to let you go. Here's your severance package. This is the document we need you to sign before you can receive your funds. In that, you can have the release. So I
Okay.
wouldn't put it. I wouldn't put it as you sign it and you get your money, otherwise just get out. I would put it as, this is your severance package before we can send you the funds. You speak with your lawyer if you have one, but this is the release we'd like. This is the separation agreement and severance agreement we'd like you to sign. So that's the way I would put it.
Well, essentially, you're doing the same thing. You're just now saying, if you don't sign this, you don't get the money.
Yeah,
They they they,
exactly.
they get to figure it out.
You're exactly, and I always tell them, just if you have an attorney, please have them look it over. We have, periodically we get, I reviewed those too. It's like, hey, I'm parting ways with a person, and unless they're being fired and don't have another job, that's the other option. What I will say is, the other thing you can say is, in certain states, you can't get both, so you can't get severance pay and unemployment. So you may talk to them and say, look, I don't know if you want the severance. You may want to collect unemployment. Do you want to take a look at this?
Hmm.
And that way you're candidly giving them some options, but you're not forcing them into a corner.
In New York State, that was not an issue. I don't know if that's changed in the last 25 years, but
It does. Some states will not allow it though. They
yeah.
will cap your unemployment because there's people like to do that, and they'll say, "Hey, we have this and this and this." New York State it isn't, but California it is. So you can't, for example, and there are other states will say, "Hey, you already signed this," and in some states it actually can lead to other issues if you make a claim because they'll say, "Hey, you made a false claim here. You had no right to this. You signed a release. You're not getting anything else." But it does go a long way, and say, but I would just say, look into that and see. I don't know if this limits your ability to receive this. What else do you need? There's a way to fire someone politely. Once in a while, it's very. I would say 30% of the time, maybe they act up, or get nasty, and then you have to see be nice but firm. But it always behooves you to be polite and to be nice. But check your state laws with that, because each law differs, and that is another way you can do that and say, you should check and see how this affects your right to collect unemployment. That's I can't advise you on that. Make sure you're not in a situation where you're like an advisor to them, because then they'll later say, "Oh, my employer got me to sign this, and they told me this," and things like that. And sometimes you're right; it is cheaper to do that, but I think that companies need to know where to draw the line. I've seen a lot of that because there are plaintiffs' attorneys and plaintiffs who will take advantage, and they will say a common one is ADA access, the Americans with Disability access to websites. So they have these people just go around and send out letters to all these companies, figuring
Yeah,
it's
well,
cheaper.
I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you fire an employee, not,
No,
you
I
know,
understand that.
yeah,
I'm the comparison I was drawing there was sometimes it's cheaper to pay
yeah,
if than hire the attorney, but
yeah,
I think as an employer and a lot of companies have to decide where that line is because once a plaintiff's attorney knows, or they go, I have had clients come to me. I've had 4 claims because they're all talking to each other.
yeah,
So they know we're going to pay out. They know we're going to pay out. This is particularly true if you have a company with a lot of employees or a lot of high turnover, depending on what kind of thing. So if you're in a situation like that, you do need to make a business decision as an employer. Am I going to fight this one and draw the line here? Because I want people to know insurance companies are known for doing that too. Normally, because they figure people make a claim, they go, "Oh, I'll just pay out on the claim." The insurance company will go, "Nah, not this one," because
yeah.
they don't want to set a precedent because they know people will take advantage. So that is a consideration too.
Yeah, that makes sense. That would be an important thing for folks to be thinking about. So, Hillary, we're almost out of time. And if you have one nugget of information that you think that our listeners would get some value from, what might that be?
I would say you'd be very surprised what is available as a resource on the internet. I'm not going to say any of our states do a particularly comprehensive job with the law to advise, but your state's employment law site and those areas are, and the federal site are actually really, really helpful. So while we have the internet, use it because there are sources out there you can read it. If initially it can be a little confusing, but if you read through it for a few hours and make the time, this is not like taking a semester class in college. It really is doable. And so you don't have to slave away, but there's information there and they have summaries and they can answer questions and they have hotlines. And I think it's an underused resource that people don't know about. And I would really encourage everyone to take a look at it. It can really clarify a lot for people because I think sometimes people get not false information, but they talk to other people. So most people have their own ideas, right? So they're telling each other, "Oh, such and such told me this." Go to your state's website. You'd be surprised how helpful it can be.
Well, Hillary, unfortunately, we are out of time. And you are a wealth of information. I'm assuming that you would be happy to talk to folks or have somebody in your firm talk to folks at least for an informational call or find some way out. If they wanted to do so, how would they find you?
They would be welcome to call us in California, New York. My email is hillary@hillarytriallawyer.com. 2 emails. You're welcome to email me directly, or you can call my office, which is 310-492-4009. And we are in California and New York and next year, Montana.
Cool. Why Montana, just out of curiosity?
I love it there. I think it's one of the last frontiers. I love the land. I like the area. I just have always liked it there, and it's steeped in history. And so when
Uh-huh.
you start thinking about places you'd like to live, I like Montana. Cold winters, much colder than you'd think. But
Well, if you're a skier, that's good.
it's very good if you're a skier or a fisherman like I am.
Oh, cool, cool. And I have two things I'd like you to do. The first one I've asked about 365 times now, and that is go to wherever you're listening to this podcast and give us an honest rating and review. And while you're there, please subscribe. The more people that subscribe, the more fun we have, and the more people we get the message out to. And the second thing is, I have been writing a newsletter now for 45 years. For the last 20 years or so, it's come out every single week. And on Tuesday morning at 9 o'clock East Coast time, it comes out every week. And I call it Josh's Musings, where I basically am musing about what it takes to take a construction company and make it economically and personally sustainable. It's really easy to get. You just go to our website at www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter, and you give us your first name and email address, and you're on the list. That's www.sustainablebusiness.co/newsletter. So this is Hillary Johns. You're with Josh Patrick. You're at Cracking the Cash Flow Code. Thanks a lot for stopping by. I hope to see you back here really soon.